With the development of the Athenian democracy around the 6th century BC, Athens was ruled by its citizens, and therefore, as the time was passing and generations were changing, the Athenians could not imagine living under a king. This was proved with the Persian invasion, when they managed to fight off the greatest empire of the time, far more superior than the Hellenic polis. But even though it wanted to be free, Athens always looked after domination over the other city-states and did not like to be less powerful or meaningful than any other polis. But the full reality is that Athens was not the only city-state to think that way. Such examples of chase for domination are the Peloponnesian Wars, the Philo Campaign, the Corinthian War, the Boeotian War, etc. With other words said, Thebes, Athens and Sparta were the rival city-states, and when some of them gained domination, the others were looking for opportunities to grab it. When Philip II from a hostage in Thebes became the king of Macedonia and made the military and economic reforms, Macedonia strengthened and extended its borders, becoming the strongest kingdom in Europe, and a threat to the Athenian democracy and Theban oligarchy. With the capture of Amphipolis and Olynthus and annexation of Thessaly, Philip II was at the doorsteps of the Hellenic city-states such as Athens and Thebes. They were aware of the danger that is knocking on the door, so Demosthenes, the lifetime enemy of the Macedonians, used his speaking skills to influence the Athenian assembly into starting negotiations with Philip II, which were very loose. Not having any other choice, Demosthenes united many Hellenic city-states under the leadership of Athens and Thebes for military confrontation with the Macedonian phalanx. But this alliance could not compete with the Macedonian soldiers, so at the Battle of Chaeronea in 338 BC, Athens' fears became a reality. They lost their self-ruling democracy and were now under Macedonian hegemony. 2 years later, the king that subjugated them was assassinated, and his throne was inherited by his 20-year-old son, Alexander III. With his arrival to the throne, many of the conquered tribes and states saw an opportunity to get rid of the Macedonian rule. So was the case with Thebes and Athens, who saw a second chance to return to their previous political life. Once again, Thebes and Athens allianced themselves against the common enemy, influenced by Demosthenes once again. But this time Thebes took the thicker part of the stick, as it was defeated in battle and burned to the ground, never to be seen again. 4 years later, in 331 BC, the Spartans saw an opportunity and gained support to revolt against Macedonia, but they were not joined by Athens. Athens learned the lesson that lasted for 12 years, until 323 BC. When Alexander the Great died. His death was a general shock throughout the world, as many people and nations saw an opportunity for power control and for the Hellenes' overthrowing of the Macedonian hegemony. With his death, the Athenian speaker Hyperion, the loudest person in Athens to call for war against Macedonia. His speeches were supported by Demosthenes, his fellow speaker and the eternal enemy of Macedonia, as well as by Leosthenes, the commander of the Hellenic forces at the time. 1 year prior to the death of Alexander, one of his most trusted treasurers and childhood friend, Harpalus, stole 5,000 talents from the Macedonian treasury and went to Athens, hoping to force an uprising against the Macedonian hegemony. However, the Athenians knew the outcome of such an uprising and imprisoned Harpalus, taking his money. Now, those money will be used to finance the war that is about to begin. The commander of the Hellenic army, Leosthenes, hired the mercenaries who were in Asia fighting for Alexander's satraps and had been disbanded in 325 BC by an order of Alexander the Great. Thus, led by Leosthenes, they traveled back home and stationed at the mercenary depot at Tanarm in Laconia. He also managed to form an alliance between Athens and the Aetolian League. This anti-Macedonian alliance was joined by other city-states such as Elea, Phocis, Messenia, etc., as the call was sent through every city-state. However, the Boeotians opposed the decision for war, as when Alexander destroyed Thebes, the Theban lands were given to the Boeotians, and the Boeotians believed that if Macedonia lost the hegemony, the Athenians would revive Thebes, thus their lands would be taken. So the Boeotians mobilized themselves for a fight. The Lamian War, or the Hellenic War, has started, with the alliance forces numbering around 25 to 30,000 soldiers and a fleet of 200 to 400 ships. The war was about to be fought on land and sea, with the first act of the alliance to prepare defenses at the most iconic and historically important pass of Thermopylae. Leosthenes set march to Thermopylae with 7,000 Aetolians and 8,000 mercenaries, and was soon to be reinforced with 5,500 Athenian soldiers. But those soldiers had to go through Boeotia in order to get to Thermopylae. So, fearing of possible attack on the Athenian reinforcements by the Boeotians, and endangering the course of the war, Leosthenes took 2,000 of the mercenaries and went to secure the back of his forces. He met with the Athenian reinforcements and found the camp of the Boeotians near Plataea. There, Leosthenes, with 5,000 Athenian citizens, 500 horsemen and 2,000 mercenaries, attacked the Boeotian camp and defeated the Boeotian army. From there, he hurried back to Thermopylae. When Antipater heard of what's going on, he sent out a call for help, on which Leonatus and Craterus both responded. Craterus had an army of 10,000 soldiers, all of which were veterans out of service on their way back to Macedonia, while Leonatus had around 20,000 soldiers with cavalry among them. But the Athenian ships were blocking the Hellespont and prevented Leonatus from crossing in Europe. Antipater did not have much time for waiting, so he gathered as many men as he could, 13,000 soldiers in total and 600 horsemen. It is worth it to mention that at that time Macedonia was draining of manpower, as Antipater was continuously sending fresh soldiers in Asia for the campaigns. With his army he started moving south, accompanied by the entire fleet which Alexander had sent to escort a sum of money from the royal treasury to Macedonia, 110 triremes in total. As he moved through Thessaly, many Thessalian horsemen joined him, as Thessaly was a loyal friend of Macedonia. But soon they suddenly left him and joined Leosthenes, who was occupying the passes of Thermopylae. When Antipater arrived there in the autumn of 323 BC, the Hellenic alliance was ready and confident in their numerical superiority. With the confidence they had, they left their positions at Thermopylae and intercepted Antipater a little northwest of Thermopylae. Antipater was defeated there by the larger army of Leosthenes. We don't have information about the course of the battle, nor about the casualties, but we know that he could not even retreat to Macedonia, so the only choice he had was to seek shelter within the city of Lamia, while his fleet was blocked by the Athenian fleet of 240 ships at the Malian Gulf. Parallel to these events, when Craterus heard that the Athenian fleet was blocking the Hellespont, he sent Cletus with his fleet of 240 ships to attack them and clear the passage. In the spring of 322 BC, at the Battle of Abydos, the Macedonian fleet defeated the Athenians and cleared the passage, allowing Leonatus to cross into Europe and go for aid of Antipater, while Cletus's fleet headed to the Malian Gulf. Leonatus managed to gather some men from Macedonia, making his army of 20,000 infantry and 1,500 cavalry, and led them through Thessaly to Lamia. Meanwhile, as Antipater found shelter in Lamia, he was stuck inside, as Leosthenes laid siege to the city in 322 BC with his army of around 30,000 men.